What is up, everybody? It's JT Sports here, and I'm back to you guys with some breaking news. So, the Detroit Lions have officially fired head coach Matt Patricia and general manager Bob Quinn. Now, during Matt Patricia's time as the head coach for the Detroit Lions, he went 13, 29, and 1. And for the Detroit Lions, Christmas has came early because a lot of Lions fans have been calling for Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn's job for a very long time, and it finally has came to fruition after the Detroit Lions suffered a loss to the Houston Texans 41-25 on Thanksgiving. And that loss against the Houston Texans was absolutely embarrassing. Okay, because the Houston Texans, after the first quarter, it didn't even look like they were trying. I mean, they were running trick plays. They were doing whatever they wanted to do against the Detroit Lions. And if you're Detroit, you had no choice but to make this move. Now, with Matt Patricia being out, offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell is going to take over as interim head coach for the rest of the season. And look, here's why Matt Patricia didn't work out as the head coach for the Detroit Lions. You have a guy who is trying to implement the Patriots way while losing football games. Let me tell you something. Bob Quinn fired Jim Caldwell, and I just made a video about this. Go ahead and check it out. There'll be a card popping up so you guys can go ahead and check that out. But Jim Caldwell got fired by Bob Quinn because 9-7 wasn't good enough. Okay, and look it up. He literally said that out of his mouth. Bob Quinn, you guys can look it up. All you got to type in is 9-7 isn't good enough, and it will pop up. Bob Quinn said that 9-7 isn't good enough for Detroit. So you fire Bob Quinn. Well, Bob Quinn fires Jim Caldwell, and he brings in Matt Patricia. And what does Matt Patricia do in his first year? He goes 6-10, and the Detroit Lions, quote, quote, rebuild. So let me get something straight. So Bob Quinn, after he fires Jim Caldwell, says that 9-7 isn't good enough. So when you say 9-7 isn't good enough, that means that the following season, you should be better than 9-7. But instead of trying to top 9-7, the Detroit Lions bring in Matt Patricia. They go 6-10, and they have a quote-quote rebuild year. Even though it made no sense to rebuild because the Detroit Lions, remind you, were coming off of 2 back-to-back 9-7 seasons. So if you're coming off 2 back-to-back 9-7 seasons, and you have a team that is pretty solid, a pretty serviceable roster, there really was no reason to rebuild. So the fact that Bob Quinn came out and said that 9-7 wasn't good enough, and he follows up those statements by going 6-10 the following season with Matt Patricia as his head coach, made no sense. So then a lot of Detroit Lions fans say, you know what? Okay, we have a rebuilding year. Maybe we do need to rebuild. So let's give Matt Patricia a little bit more time. So going into this season, Matt Patricia finally gets all of his guys. Okay, because that's what the thing was. Matt Patricia needs his guys so he can establish the coach that he wants to establish in the locker room. So he gets his guys. You get Jamie Collins. You get Desmond Trufant. You get everybody that you want in free agency. This is the best roster that the Detroit Lions have had in a very long time. And what do? Well, they end up losing to the Houston Texans on Thanksgiving, and they fall to 4-7 on the season. So when you look at Matt Patricia, how do you expect to establish the Patriots way when you're losing football games? Because listen, nobody's going to want to go through the Patriots way when you're losing football games. The Patriots way only works for Bill Belichick. Okay? Because players, when they're going to the New England Patriots, they know what to expect. Bill Belichick has the right to run the franchise the way he wants to because he has had success. He has won championships. He has won many big games coaching the way that he has. So for Matt Patricia, how do you expect to implement the Patriots way in the rebuilding year? That makes no sense. How do you expect to implement the Patriots way when you're losing football games? You see, this is why a lot of former Bill Belichick assistants fail as head coaches because they can't establish their own identity as a coach. They've tried too hard to model and build their team to resemble the New England Patriots that they don't try to build the team their own way. They don't try to become their own God. Like, they just try to do things the way the Patriots do things, and that's why they fail. Because nobody in the NFL can replicate the Patriots way. Every team in the NFL wins differently. The Patriots way of winning things doesn't mean that you have to replicate it to have success. You can replicate the way the Steelers have success. Look at the way that the Kansas City Chiefs have had success. There have been a lot of franchises over the last couple of years that have had success in the NFL without implementing the Patriots way. So you have to establish your own way of winning football games, your own coach in the locker room without trying to replicate Bill Belichick. Now, you can, kind of take tidbits of what Bill Belichick does and try to build on that. But when you look at Matt Patricia, he never did that. And when you look at Brian Flores down there in Miami, he's having success right now because he is one of the few Bill Belichick assistants that is trying to build a franchise without trying to replicate the New England Patriots. He's trying to win his way and not the Patriots way. That's the difference of why Brian Flores is having success down in Miami and why Matt Patricia has been fired along with Bob Quinn. And Bob Quinn had to get fired because Bob Quinn hired Matt Patricia. This was the guy that he handpicked. And listen, he didn't have to hire Matt Patricia. He could have just kept Jim Caldwell. Well, remind you that Jim Caldwell, although Jim Caldwell came up short in the playoffs, he did have a winning record. Although he was 8-22 against winning teams, one thing that Jim Caldwell did way better than Matt Patricia was win the division. You see, as long as you win your division, you have a pretty good chance of making it to the playoffs every single season. And that's what Jim Caldwell did that Matt Patricia didn't do. Let me tell you guys something. Jim Caldwell was 16-8 against the NFC North. Matt Patricia was 2-13 against the NFC North. See the difference? You see, winning your division is really important because the majority of the times, teams that win their division or win the games inside their division make it to the playoffs. And a lot of people don't talk about how important it is to win inside your division. Those 6 games that you play against those other 3 teams that you're matched up against every single season are really important. Because if you don't win them, they really hurt your chances of making it to the playoffs. And the teams that do win them increase their chances of making it to the playoffs. And I'm not saying that you have to win your division to make it to the playoffs, but the majority of the times you increase your chances of making it to the playoffs when you win inside your division. That's why Jim Caldwell was going 8-22 against teams that had a record of 500 and above and was still able to make it to the playoffs because he was able to win inside his division. As long as you're able to dominate your division, you're pretty good. And Jim Caldwell, his worst season as a head coach for the Detroit Lions was when they missed the playoffs in 2015. Okay, other than that, he's been pretty good. He was pretty good. So the Detroit Lions fired Jim Caldwell because they were looking for another guy to take that next jump. Similar to why the Golden State Warriors in the NBA fired Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson was a good coach and all, but he wasn't the coach to get them to the top. He built that roster up. He got them to the point, but they felt like they should be a contender. So they fire Mark Jackson, and they bring in Steve Kerr, and Steve Kerr takes them to the NBA Finals. He's won several championships as a head coach for the Golden State Warriors, and everything had worked out. But when you take a gamble like that, sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. And for Bob Quinn, he took a gamble. He fired Jim Caldwell. He tried to, upgrade, and it failed. And that's what happens in life. Sometimes, there's an old saying that goes, if you can do better, do better. But when you attempt to do better, sometimes it backfires. Sometimes you have a car that works and you trade in that car that works for a more fancier car, and then that car ends up having a lot of problems. Sometimes you end up selling your house and moving into a better house, and sometimes the house that you just moved into that you felt like was an upgrade from the house that you was previously living in has more problems than the other house. So there is a risk and reward when it comes to trying to upgrade in life. Sometimes things aren't always as good as what they appear to be. You see, for Bob Quinn, he felt that this Detroit Lions roster was good enough to compete for a championship or at least be better than 9-7, so he took a risk. He tried to find the right head coach for the Detroit Lions. He brought in Matt Patricia, and Matt Patricia wasn't the right guy. He's just another list of failed Bill Belichick assistants that haven't worked out in the NFL. So the Detroit Lions have officially ended the Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn era. It's going to be really interesting seeing who's going to become the next head coach of the Detroit Lions. Is it going to be Jim Harbaugh down there in Michigan? If I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm looking at Michigan right now, and I think that Detroit Lions job may be a little bit more appealing than staying at Michigan. Okay, there are a lot of ways that Detroit could go. And listen, I feel like Detroit has a playoff caliber roster. As long as they continue to get better in the offseason, they're just 2-3 more key players away that they can acquire in the NFL draft and free agency from becoming a playoff contender. I feel like the Detroit Lions have a playoff caliber team this year. I feel like they had the second most talented team in the division. So all Detroit really needs is a good coach, and they can easily make it to the playoffs. If they hire the right coach, they can make it to the playoffs as soon as next season. The Detroit Lions don't need to go through another rebuild. All they need is the right coach and the right GM, and this could easily be a playoff caliber team next season. So you guys let me know what you guys think about this down in the comment section down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content, and I will be uploading more Detroit Lions videos throughout the next couple of days.